In our last video, we explored some fascinating sections of the Voynich Manuscript. The Bacabs, the concept of its, the life force carried by water, the Sun Pyramid, and the foundations of both the vigesimal number system and the Maya Hab calendar. Today, we're going to pick up right where we left off. In the Yucatan Peninsula, the Maya homeland, the months from June to November are rainy, while December through May form a dry season. The most intense rains begin in July, just after the sun reaches its northernmost position on June 21st. So imagine you're an ancient Maya observer. As the sun reaches its northernmost point, the rains arrive. As it begins its journey back south, the rains slowly fade away, and when it has traveled far enough, they stop. And like virtually all ancient civilizations before them, the Maya didn't perceive celestial bodies the way we do today. The sun wasn't a ball of burning gas following a gravitational orbit. It was a living presence, with a soul, with intention, with a message. So instead of calculating angles and trajectories, they did something far more profound. They listened. They read the sky as a cycle of meaning. And naturally, what they saw in the sun's movements wasn't physics, it was mythology. And when we look at the Voynich Manuscript alongside Maya ruins, a clear picture begins to emerge. The rains that arrive as the sun moves north, they weren't just a weather pattern, they were the work of the northern Bacab. In the Maya worldview, it was he who triggered the rains. Not as a metaphor, not as a symbol, but as a literal observable fact. At least that's exactly what it looked like from where they were standing. And because of this, they saw the sun and the rain not as opposites, but as siblings. And here's where it gets really interesting. In the Maya pantheon, there is a deity known as God One. For a long time, God One puzzled researchers. Why? Because God One shares so many characteristics with Chak, the rain god, that it's almost impossible to tell them apart. God One's connection to water is unmistakable. Shark teeth, the Zok monster, a mythical shark figure, headdresses made of lotus flowers, water birds decorating his imagery. Every single one of these elements points to water. But here's the twist. The very same deity is also directly connected to the sun. He carries jaguar features, and in Maya cosmology, the jaguar is the symbol of the nocturnal sun. He bears the kin glyph on his body or head, kin meaning sun. Even his relationship with water birds is in fact a symbol of the daytime sun. So what we have here is a single deity who seems to embody both the sun and water, both the sun and the rain. Under normal circumstances, bringing these two concepts together in one figure makes very little sense. But once you understand the Bacabs in the Voynich Manuscript, and especially the northern Bacab, everything shifts. Suddenly, a deity carrying both solar and rain attributes makes perfect sense. It's not a contradiction anymore, it's a statement. And this is exactly what makes the Voynich Manuscript so extraordinary. When you go back and look at ancient Maya religion and mythology through the lens of what the manuscript reveals, everything falls into place. Every strange detail, every seemingly unrelated symbol, it all clicks. As ancient Maya observers searched for the origins of rain, they had already identified the sun, mapped the relationship between the sun's northward movement and the rains, and worked out the details of the celestial pyramid. They were getting closer to the answer, but it still wasn't enough to fully explain how water entered our world, because there was another celestial body whose direct connection to the rains they had noticed, Venus. As you know, Venus appears in the sky in two distinct forms, the evening star and the morning star. And ancient Maya observers noticed something remarkable. The periods when Venus reached its northernmost and southernmost points on the horizon marked the very beginning and the end of the rainy season. In other words, as the evening star drifted northward along the western horizon and approached its extreme point, the rains would begin. And as it shifted southward toward its opposite extreme, the rains were coming to an end. But Venus didn't move like the sun, climbing and descending the steps of a pyramid in a steady rhythmic pattern. Instead, it moved more like a serpent, winding and weaving its way around that pyramid. Venus appeared as the evening star in the west for approximately 263 days. Then it slipped between the sun and the earth, vanishing for about 8 days. After that, it reappeared in the east as the morning star for another 263 days. Finally, it passed behind the sun, disappearing once more for roughly 50 days, and the cycle was complete. So, by the nature of its cycle, Venus, as seen from Earth, would periodically appear further west than the sun, then further east, shifting north and south along the way. In short, it never truly left the pyramid. It kept circling around it endlessly. And this is exactly why the woman at the center of the calendar circles on folio 57V, shows her face twice, and disappears twice, because these women represent the 4 phases of Venus. Just like Venus in its cycle, she becomes invisible twice and visible twice. And so, for an ancient Maya sky observer, just as with the sun, Venus moving northward was connected to the rains. From this perspective, rain was linked to 3 distinct celestial elements: the sun, Venus, and the north. And naturally, the north's place in this equation was identified as the North Star. On the other hand, the sun was part of this equation, but it couldn't be the driving force. It could be a sibling to the rain, it could be connected to the rain, but it couldn't be the source of the rain, because heat and water cannot come from the same origin. And so, as far as we can tell from the Voynich Manuscript, the Maya observers reached a consensus. The 2 celestial bodies that brought the rain were Venus and the North Star. The North Star is generally symbolized with a similar concept in shamanic societies. In Turkish shamanism, the North Star is called the golden stake, iron stake, or even iron pillar. This is because it is believed that an invisible axis extending from the North Star down to the earth is driven into the ground. While iron expresses solidity, gold refers to the yellowish color of the North Star. Similarly, the Samoyeds call the North Star the nail of the sky. The Chukchi, Koryaks, Lapps, Finns, and Estonians call it the nail star. The Mongols, Buryats, and Kalmyks call it the golden pillar, and the Teleuts and others call it the sun pillar. According to the Eskimos, the pillar of the sky is identical to the pole that holds up their tent, and they are not alone in seeing the North Star as exactly the same as the pole supporting their tent. This perspective never changes among the Soyots, Altai Tatars, Buryats, in the Arctic and North America, among the Samoyeds and Ainu, in central Californian tribes such as the Maidu, Eastern Pomo, and Patwin, among the Algonquins, the Yakuts, and in Central Asian shamanism. Above all, the stake or pillar metaphor expresses the fixed, unmoving nature of the North Star. For this reason, like other ancient shamanic societies, the ancient Maya shamans also symbolize the North Star as a stake in the Voynich Manuscript. In the Voynich Manuscript, the cross figure is used for Venus. This is likely due to the fact that Venus moves in all 4 directions. The cross and stake figures you see in the Voynich Manuscript symbolize these 2 celestial bodies. More importantly, as I will describe in greater detail shortly, these 2 celestial bodies carry the water from the Bacabs into our universe. At this point, Maya observers must have seen the North Star as fixed to the northern Bacab, since the North Star is stationary in the north. For this reason, they regarded it as the carrier that brings the water of the northern Bacab into our universe. I say northern Bacab, but this is a description from our perspective. I had previously mentioned the Maya's diagonal directional placement, so this direction was actually northwest. Venus, on the other hand, is a far more mobile celestial body in the sky, constantly winding like a serpent across the heavens. It visited the other 3 Bacabs as well, delivering their water and their its into our universe. In short, there were 2 types of water in the universe. That is, 2 types of life force. One was the North Star, water symbolized by the stake. The other was the Venus water, symbolized by the cross. Indeed, it was a distinguishing characteristic, which water purified, which life energy was received, from the stars in the sky down to the plants. For a belief system that regards celestial bodies as gods, observing the sky is an act of worship. Watching the gods and trying to understand what they do and why they do it is not astronomy. It is ancient theology. In short, the sacred scripture of an ancient shaman is the sky itself, and astronomy is the effort to interpret it. And indeed, this was the case for the ancient Maya as well. They sought to understand everything down to the finest detail and to decipher every building block of their mythological universe. For this purpose, they first tried to understand the altitude of Venus. They extended the pyramid they used for the sun, which I explained in the previous video, all the way down to the Earth. As I mentioned before, the interval of 17 latitudes was 2.67 degrees. When they spread this across the entire sky, a sky of 67 latitudes emerged, 1 celestial meridian, and 33 northern and 33 southern latitudes. Naturally, this revealed a secondary celestial pyramid of 34 steps. But unlike the Sun Pyramid, this was the Great Pyramid, stretching from the Earth all the way to the entire sky. The Sun Pyramid was seen as the pyramidion of this pyramid, the last 9 steps belonging to the celestial realm, the domain of the Sun. You may not believe what you hear, but the first 2 circles in the F57V calendar wheel most likely track these latitudes. The innermost one traces the 34 latitudes from the south up to the celestial equator. The second one similarly traces the 34 latitudes from the north down to the equator. However, Venus travels slightly further than the Sun in the north-south direction, while the latitudes at which the Sun is seen at its furthest north and south are 23.5 degrees. Those of Venus are 28 degrees. This shows that Venus can descend approximately 2 steps further on this pyramid. In short, Venus occupies an 11-step zone at the top of this pyramid. From this point, they realize that Venus approaches the Earth by 2/3. This is the point where water enters the universe. Thus, the Sun was left outside the water zone. That is, Venus releases water from 2/3 of the sky down to the Earth. For this reason, the zone where the Sun resides forms a dry region. They accepted that the North Star approaches the Earth by 1/3. This revealed a pyramid that is fundamentally 3-layered, but with 33 steps. A pyramid whose topmost point is touched by the Sun, whose 22nd step is touched by Venus, and whose 11th step is touched by the North Star. Just like the famous pyramid at Chichen Itza, which consists of 3 nested pyramids, the innermost and smallest being 10 meters, the second 20 meters, and the outermost 30 meters. However, there is a difference that sets the North Star apart from the other 2 celestial bodies in the equation. The North Star never makes contact with this pyramid, whose summit is the Sun's zenith. While one center and apex is the equator, a 33-step pyramid, extending from it down to the Earth, can never encompass the North Star, because the North Star is permanently fixed in the north. As we see in the Voynich Manuscript, they explain this situation with the concept of the twin peaks. Again, 9 became the common divisor. They divided the sky into 9. The Sun at the very top, and the 9 steps below it, remained within the last 3 layers of the Great Pyramid. This is the dry zone where the Sun scorches and no water is found. From the 6th layer onward, Venus water reaches the universe and descends down the pyramid, giving life to the universe. The North Star, when viewed from the west, is located as a separate peak on the right, at the 3rd step of the pyramid. Its water flows into the universe from there. At the second step, the waters of both merge together. The drawing that best explains this in the Voynich manuscript is found on page F78R. While the water flowing from the cross-figured water source on the left reaches the Earth by passing through 6 celestial sections, the water flowing from the stake-figured water source on the right reaches the Earth by passing through 3 celestial sections and layers. Naturally, this gives rise to a twin-peaked mountain iconography. On the other hand, the very first sentence of the Voynich manuscript begins as follows. Cha zan ukab al kaish itzub. That is, the domain of the source of Kaish's its is the 2 peaks. As stated in its introduction, this is precisely the subject of the Voynich manuscript. These 2 peaks, which are the source of Kaish's wisdom, and the its, that is wisdom, that enters the universe from these peaks. As you can see on the screen, the Voynich manuscript depicts these 2 celestial bodies, or rather, their role as sources of water, through 2 figures that resemble grapes or pine cones. So, what is the meaning behind this symbolism? Actually, at first glance, the figures at the top look like the stem of a fruit, such as a grape or a blueberry. The parts extending from this stem resemble leaves, and the round shapes below resemble the fruit itself. Because of this, it initially gives the impression of a fruit. But this is purely a resemblance in the drawing, an unintentional similarity. In reality, this is not what the author is trying to convey. The cross and stake figures indicate which 2 sources of water these are. They are not the stems of these fruits. Those strips extending outward are simply the way the Voynich manuscript depicts the star's hinterland. It is a drawing style, of which I will provide many other examples later on. The round shapes extending downward below are drawings that you can see in Maya glyphs, Maya art, Maya codices, and Maya stelae, everywhere related to rain. These drawings most commonly appear in the glyphs for tun, meaning stone, wits, meaning mountain, and kawak, meaning rain. They are directly connected to depictions of rain and the rain god Chak. So these images you see in the Voynich manuscript are essentially larger renderings of those very signs. Furthermore, the Voynich manuscript reveals to us the meaning of these figures: stone, mountain, and rain. Normally, without the Voynich manuscript, it would be impossible to find the common thread between these 3. But once you understand that these 2 images represent 2 mountain peaks that bring rain into our universe, the meaning falls into place. These are the rocky summits of the mountains. The water from the sources, the bakabs, seeps through the stones at these peaks and disperses into the universe. To illustrate this metaphor, it has been drawn as an inverted peak, an upside-down hill, or perhaps a reverse stalactite from a cave. Let's pause this video for now. We'll continue in the next one, because explaining all the topics of the Voynich manuscript in a single video would be too long. That's why I'm ending it here. I will explain the reasons for everything I've covered so far, both as an article on my academia.edu account and through individual videos. My only intention right now is to summarize the entire subject of the Voynich manuscript in one go. I will move on to the text and paragraph translations later. Please follow along. I don't want such a profound philosophy to be lost.